Okay, thank you very much. A very enlightening presentation by Elsa. Now, as some of you may know, the CYBERWEEK is organized with many partners and by us, the Interdisciplinary Cyber Research Center. And as a research center, we operate a significant research fund looking to promote interdisciplinary research, both between disciplines and between different institutions. With that context, it gives me a great pleasure to introduce the next speakers who present such a joint work between disciplines and between institutions. Dr. Chris Demchak is a Grace Hopper Professor and Chair of Cybersecurity Studies and Director of Center of Cyber Conflict Studies in the U.S. Naval War College. Her research and many publications resulted in significant contributions, such as terming the concept of cyber conflict. And Dr. Demchak holds degrees in engineering, economics, and social technical complex systems. Professor Yuval Shavitt from Tel Aviv University is a professor of electrical engineering. He worked for several years at the networking center of Bell Labs in New Jersey and has published several papers in the fields of caching, routing, security, and network measurements, and they will present their joint research. Please welcome them on stage.
So we're I love coming to a cyber conference, having people going, I don't know. It's here somewhere. It's somewhere there. I like it. See what's try that one. Okay, this is good. This is very encouraging. So there's two of us, so you get two for this one. But I'm going to talk pretty fast. Basically, what we're interested in talking about is this conflict going on now between the great powers that, although we're not calling it lawfare, has a lot to do with the fact that we're not looking in the right places for the kinds of information that we need that tells us where, in a sense, the adversary is operating. What we've been interested in is a mystery. Why was China so willing to sign that 2015 agreement? They agreed not to hack. They're military folks, are commercial entities for espionage and IP purposes. Well, maybe the reason is they were getting information that they needed in another way. And maybe it wasn't something we were looking for. And how come they do seem to do rather well, and it looks suspiciously like stuff we might have had at one time in business as well as political? I mean, the rise of China, given its scale, was certainly inevitable, but certainly as fast as it has is quite astonishing, isn't it? So where are we blind? And so part of the argument we're going to make today is that we've been focused on hacking the machine and not hacking the system as a whole. That we haven't looked in between where the hacks might be as much as we've looked at the hacks. We find that this is aided by a general lack of knowledge by the people who are both defending. They're defending at the endpoints. They don't understand the entire system, and a massive lack of knowledge about how the internet is constructed by the policymakers. And that leaves these wonderful seams into which adversaries may flow, and in particular China. So we're going to talk about that today. I'm going to give you a little quick gravitas overview of the structure of the internet that you may not remember. I'm going to talk about what has been found, and then we'll come to a recommendation at the end. So my colleague Yuval will take over.
Thank you. So a quick engineering overview about the internet. So the internet is really a collection of tens of thousands of networks that work together to get us connectivity. The one piece of glue that is really needed here is something called BGP, the Border Gateway Protocol, which is the routing protocol between networks. And BGP is what we call a distributed protocol. That means that everybody works together to achieve some goal. And as Leslie Lamport, one of the founders of computer science, said, a distributed system is one that a failure in a computer that you don't know even exists can turn your computer unusable. So we're talking about failures, and we can talk about malicious intent, and this is what we think is happening right now. So the idea is that there's something called IP hijack attack, where through BGP or through other means, an attacker can divert traffic to whatever he wants to. In our case, for example, Chinese want to get US information. They would divert traffic towards their own network, and by this, they're going to have the options to look at the data. So we're talking about espionage, but since traffic is now moving through our network, we can do what is called man-in-the-middle attacks, and then there's endless possibility to do Trojan insertions, penetration, etc. There are really many, many means of doing those diversion attacks. I talked about BGP, but there are other ways to do it through DNS and through what I call data plane manipulations. Now, to do this, you can do it from the end of the world, of course, but it's becoming easier if you're close to the target. So, yes, Chinese can hijack traffic from China, but it's much easier to hijack traffic if you have presence in the US. And this is exactly what we're going to talk about now. Just a little bit about hijack. So the most famous Chinese hijacking attack happened 8 years ago. For a period of about 18 minutes, the Chinese hacked or diverted about 15% of the internet in what is probably the largest showdown of ability. And this affected, of course, many, many facilities in the US and outside of the US. But if you look about China Telecom, which is actually owned by the Chinese government, you see that it has quite a large presence in North America. There are 10 POPs, what you call point of presence. These are locations that are actually owned by China Telecom, operated by China Telecom, on US and Canadian soil. This is like an embassy. It's an internet embassy of the Chinese. And the question is, why do they need such large presence? So we set up a system. The system is monitoring many, many routes in the internet. And then it flows through some quite sophisticated algorithmics. It looks at many, many aspects of the routes in order to understand which are okay and which one are maliciously diverted. And I'm going to show you some results of routes we found that shows the point we're talking about. So here's an example of two routes from Ottawa, Canada to Japan. On the top, you see the regular route, Ottawa, Toronto, US, West Coast, and then Japan. And then there's a mistake here. It's not Maryland, but what's happening here is the China Telecom is using their POP in Toronto. They hijack the traffic. It's very easy for them because they're really, really close to the source of the traffic, and they send it to China. And from China back to Japan. As I said, it's a perfect man-in-the-middle attack, and it's a stealth attack. So nobody can really understand or see that he's under attack. Those attacks can last for weeks and months. Perfect espionage tool. Did I say Japan? Yeah, I was thinking about the next slide. Yeah, you're right. So next example, this is Japan and Maryland, actually. So what you see here is traffic from Scandinavia, both Sweden and Norway at least, going through the US to Japan, and then in Maryland, US East Coast, it is hijacked to China, and from there back to Japan. You can see here on the right the AS routing tree, and China Telecom AS is highlighted in yellow. And you can see the Telia Sonera, the large Swedish provider, is hijacked by China Telecom. So everybody is connecting through this provider in Europe is basically sent to China. Last example, traffic from Italy to Thailand, financial traffic, multiple hijack routes through Chinese providers. Somebody was really, really interested in what's going on there. And again, hijack was at least partially done on US soils in China Telecom POPs. And last example, it's a large attack on traffic from US to Italy. This is financial traffic between banks. Usual route, as you can see, one example. This is affecting traffic from all over the US. You see traffic from Houston going through Ashburn to Milan, Italy, and then 9 hours of hijack where traffic is sent to China. I must say that this specific attack was really not very well organized. You can see that at some point the Chinese just didn't know what to do, but still it was long and had potential damaging, a large damaging effect. So I'll handle the back to you.
So we were thinking, what do you do? Because one of the things that's usually missed is it does actually matter if you're close. In your internet, basically, if you understand TCP/IP, it goes to the closest node. And so if you can insert nodes, then you can capture a lot of traffic and divert it as you like. So what can we do about this? Well, one of the ideas we had is that we would simply establish an access reciprocity norm. First question we asked was, does the US or any US companies have any points of presence in China? The answer is no. And we said, well, what about other foreign governments having points of presence in the US? Yes, quite, they have them. They just don't manifest this behavior. So this seems to be a different kind of animal we're dealing with. So one of the questions was, well, we can ask for this access reciprocity norm. We can say, well, if you're not going to allow any unfettered points of presence or POPs in China, then none from China Telecom in the US. An alternative is if you have one in the US, you're just not allowed to transit data to or from the US or its allies. It would require a modification of the normal routing tables, but this is doable. And another alternative, which would be completely China neutral, is no foreign government gets to have more than one as a global standard. These are actually pretty straightforward, and they're country neutral. But they recognize that if you have a point of presence, given the way TCP/IP was set up, you actually have a possibility of engaging in bad behaviors that's very hard to get a handle on. And this would be something we can talk about in the future. And as Yuval has demonstrated, we can show you it's already happening. So it's certainly worth a conversation. Thank you very much.